The small-town courthouse sat under the gray October sky like a sentinel of order, its brick facade polished, yet unassuming. Inside, the wooden benches gleamed, polished by decades of hurried footsteps, anxious spectators, and the occasional courtroom drama that everyone would talk about for weeks. On this particular morning, the building seemed quieter than usual, as if even the walls sensed that something unusual was about to unfold. Judge Harmon, a man known for his calm demeanor and measured patience, adjusted his robes and shuffled papers on the bench, preparing for what had been scheduled as a routine hearing. Among the scattered spectators, a tiny figure caught more than a few curious glances. Lily, a 3-year-old girl with wide, innocent eyes and soft brown curls, sat perched on her mother's lap. Her small hand clutched her mother's finger with a grip that was firm despite her youth. There was an air of nervous curiosity about her, the kind only children of her age can exude. Part fear, part wonder, entirely unself-conscious. She didn't understand the legal jargon being muttered around her, the whispers of adults weighing procedural details, or the significance of her presence in this solemn, echoing chamber. She only knew that something felt different, something heavy and tense hung in the air, like a storm about to break. At the front of the courtroom, Officer Daniels entered, leading a police K-9 named Max. Max was a large German shepherd, his coat glinting under the fluorescent lights, his posture perfect and disciplined, the picture of alert authority. His paws thudded against the polished floor in a steady rhythm that seemed to command attention, and his eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room continuously. The officer's uniform was impeccable, his demeanor professional yet cautious, aware that not every presence in the room was accustomed to facing a dog trained for intimidation and obedience. The spectators exchanged glances. Max was not just a dog. He was a symbol of law enforcement, discipline, and power, the kind of creature that could overwhelm anyone with sheer presence. And here, standing in the midst of a room full of adults, was Lily, the smallest and youngest figure anyone had ever seen in a courtroom, her tiny frame dwarfed by both the dog and the imposing wooden benches that lined the chamber. People whispered softly, their voices barely above the hum of the heating system. "She's only 3. What will she do?" murmured one woman, adjusting her glasses nervously. Lily's mother, Claire, whispered words of comfort. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just stay calm." Her voice was gentle, soothing, but her eyes were wide with anticipation. She had no idea how her daughter would react, and yet she trusted her innate courage. Lily nodded slightly, her small head barely rising above the edge of the bench. There was a strange bravery in her posture, not the reckless boldness of children, but the quiet, watchful stillness of someone observing the world carefully, trying to understand it. Judge Harmon raised his gavel lightly, signaling the start of proceedings. "Today's demonstration is part of the standard K-9 protocol, meant to illustrate the procedures used in handling threats," he explained. His voice was calm, professional, yet it carried the weight of authority. Officers and spectators alike paid close attention, but all eyes were drawn to the tiny girl in the front row. The contrast could not have been starker. A trained, imposing dog on one side, a delicate child on the other, and a room full of adults holding their collective breath. Officer Daniels approached the center of the courtroom with measured steps, Max following obediently. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice even, "this is Max, a certified police dog trained for a variety of law enforcement tasks, including detection and apprehension." Max's ears twitched, his gaze unwavering. The officer continued, explaining the dog's training regimen, his obedience exercises, and the protocols for handling tense situations. While the adults listened with professional interest, the murmurs of curiosity grew louder among the lay audience. Cameras clicked quietly. Some journalists began scribbling notes, sensing that this scene could be extraordinary. Max shifted slightly, his paws scraping against the wooden floor with a soft, deliberate sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Lily's eyes followed him carefully, her tiny brows furrowed in concentration. She did not look afraid, but neither did she smile. There was a contemplative stillness in her gaze, as if she were trying to understand something deeper than just the physical presence of the dog. Her mother whispered encouragement, stroking her hair gently, and Lily leaned into her touch for reassurance. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Adults shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others exchanging nervous glances. Everyone was waiting for a reaction, a scream, a tear, a sudden retreat. After all, how could anyone anticipate how a 3-year-old might face a fully trained police dog, an animal accustomed to detecting fear, intimidation, and aggression in adults? The suspense hung in the air, and even Judge Harmon's calm eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity. Lily's gaze remained fixed on Max, as the officer demonstrated the dog's obedience. Max responded to commands with precision, sitting, lying down, and standing in a perfect sequence that showcased his discipline. The sound of his paws and the crisp commands of the officer echoed in the courtroom, bouncing off the high ceilings and polished walls. The crowd was mesmerized, but their attention kept flicking back to the small girl. Would she approach? Would she panic? Would she cry? Finally, Judge Harmon addressed the courtroom. "We will now demonstrate the interaction with a minor," he announced, gesturing toward Lily. There was a collective intake of breath. Officers exchanged quick, cautious glances. Parents whispered to their children, trying to explain the situation without alarm. Claire held her daughter close, preparing for the moment she knew was coming, though she could not predict how it would unfold. The air was heavy with anticipation, every second stretching, elongating the moment into what felt like eternity. Lily took a slow, deliberate breath, lifting her tiny hand to her mother's face, signaling readiness. Her mother nodded, squeezing her hand gently. The spectators leaned forward instinctively, a hush settling over the room. Max's ears flicked, and his head tilted slightly, sensing the shift in focus. He was trained to detect emotions, yet something in Lily's calmness seemed different. Unafraid, deliberate, patient. The tension that had dominated the courtroom for minutes now focused on the interaction that was about to occur, an encounter no one could have predicted. As Lily's first stepped forward met the polished floor, the sound of her tiny shoes echoed in the silence, drawing every eye in the room. Hearts pounded. Some spectators gasped quietly. She froze a few feet away from Max, her eyes wide, measuring, assessing. The officer's hand hovered near the leash, but did not move. Judge Harmon's gavel rested silently on the bench. The courtroom was still, suspended in a rare moment of anticipation. And in that stillness, every adult present understood that what was about to happen could change the way they saw courage, not as force, but as quiet, deliberate bravery. The courtroom remained tense, the air almost vibrating with anticipation. After the dramatic introduction of Lily and Max, it was time to truly understand who was who, and what roles they would play in the moment that had captured everyone's attention. Judge Harmon, a veteran of countless cases, leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the polished surface of the bench. He watched the interactions closely, not only as a neutral arbiter, but as a witness to something extraordinary in the making. The adult spectators exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered speculations, others simply held their breath, unsure what to expect next. Officer Daniels stepped forward deliberately, his polished boots clicking against the courtroom floor. Max followed obediently, moving with the smooth precision of a creature trained to detect the slightest hesitation or fear. The officer was in his mid-30s, a man of composed authority, with eyes sharp enough to notice the smallest change in the room. His presence demanded respect, as did the presence of Max, whose lean, muscular body exuded power. The dog's coat gleamed under the bright overhead lights, each hair in perfect alignment, each movement deliberate. This was no ordinary dog. This was an instrument of law, obedience, and intimidation. The crowd felt the weight of the contrast, the officer's composed authority, Max's immense size and discipline, and Lily's small, delicate figure, barely able to rise above the edge of her mother's lap. She was a tiny speck of humanity in the middle of a room that had suddenly become a stage for a high-stakes display. People instinctively leaned forward, their curiosity mixed with worry. "She's just a little girl," whispered one man, adjusting his tie nervously. "How is she supposed to face that dog?" Others nodded, equally unsure. Claire, Lily's mother, tried to calm both her own nerves and her daughter's. She leaned down, brushing back a curl from Lily's forehead, whispering, "Remember what we practiced. Be calm. You can do this." Lily nodded quietly, her eyes fixed on Max, not with fear, but with a strange, mature attentiveness that seemed beyond her years. She had observed dogs before, both gentle pets and the occasional intimidating police canine during her mother's neighborhood walks, but this was different. This dog was a professional, trained to respond to tension and perceived threat, yet here she was, unafraid. The courtroom itself seemed to lean in. Every spectator felt the tension of anticipation. Some were parents, projecting their own fears onto the tiny girl. Others were simply curious townsfolk, drawn by the unusual nature of the case. Cameras clicked discreetly. Reporters scribbled notes in neat columns, eager to capture the extraordinary details. The presence of a child in the courtroom, interacting directly with a canine, was unprecedented. And yet, the drama wasn't just in the situation. It was in the contrasts. Strength and vulnerability, discipline and innocence, fear and calmness, all converged in a single room. Max shifted slightly, sensing the focus of all eyes on him. His ears flicked as he scanned the room, instinctively detecting tension, curiosity, and caution. The officer gave a subtle command, and Max responded with near-perfect precision. He sat, stood, and lay down on cue, demonstrating obedience and readiness. Each movement was a reminder that this was no ordinary dog. He could sense hesitation and react, and the slightest misstep could have consequences. The crowd noted every motion, their hearts pounding in unison with the thud of Max's paws. Judge Harmon cleared his throat and addressed the courtroom. For today's demonstration, we are showing how trained K-9 units operate in controlled environments. It is important for everyone to observe the protocols, and equally important to understand the reactions of those involved. His words were steady, but the cadence of his speech carried the subtle weight of expectation. Everyone understood that this demonstration would be memorable, but few anticipated exactly how memorable it would be. The judge's role was to maintain order, yet even he seemed intrigued, leaning forward slightly to observe the upcoming interaction. Officer Daniel spoke again, introducing the finer points of Max's training. He explained that Max had been trained not only to detect illegal substances and potential threats, but also to respond to human emotion. "This dog," Daniel said, his voice even, "is sensitive to fear, aggression, and hesitation. He is trained to protect, not to harm, but he will react if provoked." The adults in the room nodded thoughtfully, but all attention kept returning to Lily. Could a 3-year-old truly understand how to approach such a powerful creature? Lily's calmness contrasted sharply with the tension around her. While the adults speculated, whispered, and held their breath, she observed Max carefully. Her eyes studied him, taking in the details, the way he shifted his weight, the flick of his ears, the intensity in his gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply watched. There was a maturity in her observation, a subtle understanding of presence that went beyond words. Even the officer seemed to notice it. "She's different," he muttered under his breath, a mix of curiosity and admiration in his tone. Claire whispered again, gently, her hand brushing Lily's back. "Take your time. You can do this. Just be calm." Lily nodded slightly, inhaling deeply. She had never faced a situation like this before. But somehow she instinctively knew that aggression would provoke fear. And fear would provoke Max. Instead, she relied on observation, patience, and the quiet confidence of a child who had learned to listen to the world around her. The adults watched, holding their collective breath, waiting for the moment when Lily would finally take that step forward. The courtroom seemed to lean in even closer as the minutes stretched. Every spectator felt the electricity in the air, the impossible tension of a child facing a trained police dog. Journalists exchanged notes, some whispering, "This is going to be the headline of the year." The officer gave Max a subtle command, preparing him for the demonstration. Max obeyed, alert but not aggressive, his instincts finely tuned. The dog's readiness highlighted the magnitude of the challenge ahead. Could Lily's courage and calmness be enough to hold the room and the dog in check? And then, Judge Harmon, with a steady but intrigued voice, addressed Lily directly. "Young lady, would you like to come forward and meet Max?" The courtroom collectively inhaled. Claire's hand squeezed Lily's in reassurance. Lily lifted her chin, eyes locked on the dog. Slowly, deliberately, she rose from her mother's lap. The tiniest footsteps echoed in the polished chamber, each one magnified by the silence that had fallen over the room. Adults leaned forward, jaws tight, hearts racing, anticipating the impossible. A tiny girl was about to face a massive, trained police dog, and no one could predict the outcome. In that suspended moment, the courtroom wasn't just a place of law. It was a stage for courage, patience, and unexpected bravery. Lily's small figure, Max's imposing presence, and the weight of dozens of adults' expectations created a tableau that seemed almost cinematic. Every eye followed the tiny girl's movements. Every breath was held. The suspense had built to a palpable crescendo. And though nothing had happened yet, everyone knew that in moments, history, or at least a story worthy of being retold, would unfold in the most astonishing way. The courtroom had fallen into a heavy silence, every breath held collectively by the spectators, officers, and even Judge Harmon. Lily, barely 3, stood at the edge of her mother's bench, eyes locked on Max. The dog sat perfectly still, alert but calm, his head tilted slightly, ears flicking at every sound. The air seemed to thrum with anticipation. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, aware that the next few moments could either astonish or alarm everyone present. Every person present felt the gravity of what was about to unfold. Claire, Lily's mother, knelt slightly to match her daughter's height, whispering softly, "You're doing fine, sweetheart. Just breathe and be calm." Lily nodded, gripping her mother's hand tightly. She had no fear in her expression, only focused curiosity. She had watched dogs before, both her family's pets and neighbors' dogs in the park, but never one like Max, a professional canine, trained to detect fear, aggression, and threats. Her little mind seemed to calculate, almost instinctively, the power of calm presence versus panic. Max, sensing the shift in focus toward the small human in front of him, tilted his head, nostrils flaring slightly. His training had taught him to notice hesitation, fear, or aggression. Many adults had tried to remain calm before him, yet Lily's demeanor was different. She radiated quiet confidence, a stillness that caught even the officer off guard. Officer Daniels, who had handled countless tense situations with Max, felt a flicker of uncertainty. He knew the dog was ready to act on perceived threats, but Lily presented none. She was still yet aware, observing the animal's every subtle movement. The spectators leaned forward in their seats. Some whispered nervously, "She's too small. She doesn't even know what she's doing." Others muttered quietly, "That's amazing. Look at her. She's not scared." Cameras clicked discreetly as journalists attempted to capture the moment without disturbing the fragile balance. The courtroom had transformed from a place of mundane legal proceedings into a stage for courage, patience, and an improbable confrontation between innocence and trained authority. Judge Harmon's voice broke the silence, calm yet slightly intrigued. "Young lady, would you like to approach Max?" Lily's small hand left her mother's grasp for a fraction of a second as she took a deep breath. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward. Each movement, tiny as it was, echoed in the courtroom, magnified by the tension that had built over minutes. The sound of her little shoes against the polished floor seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Every head turned, every eye focused. A collective gasp rose when she paused a few feet away from Max, her tiny figure dwarfed by the powerful animal. Max's eyes tracked her every movement. His ears twitched slightly, alert to the changes in her posture, the rhythm of her breathing, the energy she radiated. Officer Daniels remained ready, hand hovering near the leash, prepared to intervene if necessary. Yet, for the first time in his experience, the officer hesitated. There was a strange, unspoken understanding between the child and the dog, a silent communication beyond words. The courtroom watched, mesmerized, as the tiniest of humans faced a creature trained to command fear. Lily's gaze never wavered. She observed Max closely, noticing the subtle shift of his weight, the flick of his tail, the glimmer in his eyes. She adjusted her stance slightly, standing tall despite her size, radiating the kind of calm authority that defied her years. Spectators whispered again, some holding their hands over their mouths. Claire's grip tightened around her daughter's other hand, a mixture of pride and anxiety coursing through her. She could hardly believe her daughter's bravery, and neither could anyone else in the room. The tension stretched, seconds blending into minutes. Max remained seated but alert, muscles taut like coiled springs. Officer Daniels spoke softly to the dog, offering quiet reassurances. "It's okay, Max. Stay calm." The dog responded instantly, the tension in his body easing slightly, yet he remained attentive. Every person in the room felt the subtle shift. The dog, trained to detect fear, seemed to recognize Lily's fearlessness. A ripple of amazement went through the courtroom. This was a child commanding respect without a word, without force, simply by presence and quiet confidence. Lily's small voice finally broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "Hi, Max," she said, her tone steady, friendly, and calm. The simplicity of her greeting carried more power than anyone could have predicted. Max's ears flicked once, then twice. His gaze softened, tail flicking slightly. Officer Daniels' jaw tightened in surprise. The courtroom remained frozen in awe. No one had expected such composure, such innate understanding of authority and empathy from someone so young. Even Judge Harmon leaned forward, eyebrows raised, quietly marveling at the scene before him. Every spectator felt a mixture of relief and astonishment. Lily had approached, spoken, and yet the tension had not escalated. Instead, it had transformed into something almost magical. Max sat attentively, responding to her calm energy rather than the usual nervousness or aggression that adults sometimes displayed. The officer, who had handled countless tense K9 demonstrations, shook his head slightly. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. Other officers nodded quietly, acknowledging that what was unfolding was beyond typical protocol, beyond expectations. The atmosphere shifted again as Lily inched closer. Every step was deliberate but gentle, confident yet cautious. She had learned from observation that sudden movements could provoke the dog, so she moved with the quiet patience of someone who understood more than her age suggested. Her mother whispered a final encouragement. "You're doing amazing," and Lily nodded without turning. Focused entirely on Max, the courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath once more, waiting for the moment of contact. The first interaction between child and dog that would define the rest of the demonstration. And then, at the perfect moment, Lily's tiny hand reached out, almost instinctively, toward Max's head. The dog responded instantly, not with aggression, but with recognition. His posture relaxed further, and his tail wagged subtly. The room erupted internally with astonishment, though no sound broke the hushed air. Adults exchanged incredulous glances. The officer's voice was calm, but filled with wonder as he murmured, "Unbelievable. She's doing it right." Even Judge Harmon, a man rarely impressed by spectacle, could not hide a smile of admiration. The tension melted into amazement as Lily's presence seemed to radiate a calming effect. The officers, spectators, and journalists were witnesses to an extraordinary moment. A tiny child demonstrating bravery, patience, and an almost innate understanding of power. Max, the imposing canine, had become an audience to her courage rather than the other way around. The adults in the room, who had anticipated drama, fear, or panic, found themselves learning a subtle lesson about presence, empathy, and the unspoken communication between humans and animals. As Lily stepped back slightly, still maintaining eye contact, the courtroom remained captivated. This was no ordinary demonstration. It was a testament to the quiet strength of the smallest participants, a reminder that courage and calm could disarm even the most disciplined of creatures. Spectators felt a shiver of awe, understanding that the moment they had witnessed would linger in memory far longer than any typical courtroom case. And in that tense, stretched silence, the story of a tiny girl confronting a massive police dog was being written, unforgettable and extraordinary. The courtroom held its breath as Lily's small hand hovered just above Max's head. Every eye was glued to the scene, the tiny child, the imposing canine, and the officer whose experience had never prepared him for this moment. Max's golden eyes reflected both alertness and a surprising gentleness, responding to the calm, steady presence of someone so small. Spectators leaned forward, silent, as the seconds stretched, taut with suspense. Everyone waited for the inevitable reaction, imagining fear, panic, or a startled child. Yet Lily remained still, focused, and in complete command of her own tiny energy. Claire, Lily's mother, whispered softly for reassurance, but this time she did not touch her daughter. "You've got this, Lily. Just be yourself." Lily's gaze flicked briefly toward her mother, a tiny nod acknowledging her encouragement, and then returned to Max. Her breathing was steady, her expression thoughtful. At that moment, she was not just a child facing a trained police dog. She was a presence, a calm force in a room filled with tension, waiting for the next heartbeat to define what would happen next. The silence was absolute. Cameras clicked quietly, journalists scribbled in disbelief, and spectators held their collective breath. Officer Daniels lowered his hand slightly, still alert, still ready to intervene if needed. Max's ears twitched, his body perfectly poised, his training anticipating potential fear or aggression. But instead, he sensed only calmness. A subtle energy shift filled the room, a rare occurrence where courage, innocence, and empathy merged in a single, fragile form. And then, in a voice clear enough to carry across the silent chamber, Lily spoke her words. "It's okay," she said. 2 words, simple, soft, yet resonating through the room like a gentle but commanding presence. The effect was immediate. The spectators gasped, some clutching their chests in astonishment. Judge Harmon's eyes widened, eyebrows lifting in surprised admiration. Officer Daniels froze mid-motion, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. Max, the trained canine, relaxed visibly, tail giving a small, wagging flick. The energy in the room shifted in an almost imperceptible, yet profound way. A tiny child's words had diffused a tension that had gripped everyone for minutes. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Did she just say that? One woman murmured, clutching her purse. Yes. Yes, she did, replied her friend, eyes wide in disbelief. Cameras clicked, reporters quickly noting down the moment. The courtroom, once tense and electric with suspense, now filled with awe and wonder. People felt a strange mixture of relief and amazement. A 3-year-old had, in 2 words, commanded respect from a massive, trained police dog. Teaching everyone present an unexpected lesson about courage, presence, and calm authority. Lily remained still, her eyes focused on Max, her hands relaxed by her side. She had spoken her words not as a demand, not as an act of bravado, but with innate understanding, a sense of assurance and empathy that seemed beyond her years. Max, trained to respond to subtle cues of human emotion, responded instantly. His body relaxed further, his massive head lowering slightly, ears shifting into a neutral position. The tension in the room melted almost entirely, replaced by astonishment, admiration, and a rare sense of reverence for the small human standing in front of them. Officer Daniels exhaled slowly, a smile breaking across his usually stoic face. He patted Max gently, acknowledging the unusual interaction. "Well, I'll be," he muttered under his breath. The crowd watched silently, some in tears, some in stunned smiles. Claire let out a long, relieved breath, hugging her daughter tightly once Lily had stepped back. The 2 words, "It's okay," had transformed the atmosphere. Adults who had arrived tense, anticipating drama or fear, now felt a profound lesson unfold before their eyes. Courage and empathy, they realized, did not come in size or volume. They came in presence, patience, and understanding. Judge Harmon cleared his throat, regaining composure. Though his expression revealed admiration, he rarely allowed himself to display. "This is extraordinary," he said slowly. "I have presided over hundreds of cases, and I have never witnessed such composure, such bravery, from anyone, let alone a child of 3. The courtroom nodded, murmurs of agreement rippling through the benches. The story had already begun to take on a life of its own, and it wasn't even officially recorded beyond the immediate spectators. Everyone realized they had witnessed something rare, almost magical. A child demonstrating authority without force, empathy without instruction. Spectators began exchanging glances, their eyes wide. Some whispered to each other about the child's courage. Others simply shook their heads, smiling in awe. Journalists scribbled furiously, capturing every detail of the moment, knowing that the 2 words uttered by Lily would become the centerpiece of a story that would soon spread beyond the small town. Cameras captured Max sitting calmly, his imposing presence now softened by the trust he instinctively felt in Lily's calm demeanor. It was a perfect demonstration of the unexpected bond between humans and animals. Even the officer's colleagues, usually reserved and professional, found themselves whispering to each other in astonishment. "I've seen trained dogs respond to aggressive adults, but never like this," one remarked. "She didn't command him. She calmed him." The realization settled in slowly. Lily had done something extraordinary. Not through strength, not through loudness, not through fear, but simply by being present, confident, and empathetic. Max's response validated her courage, transforming a courtroom demonstration into a moment of pure human and animal connection. Claire knelt beside Lily after the initial awe settled. "You were amazing, sweetie," she whispered, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. Lily smiled faintly, proud but calm, understanding in her own childlike way that she had done something remarkable. "It's okay," she repeated softly, almost to herself, as if reinforcing the lesson she had just conveyed to everyone present. The two words, repeated once, echoed in the minds of all spectators, a quiet reminder of the power of courage, empathy, and calmness in the face of fear. Judge Harmon allowed a moment of silence to pass before he addressed the courtroom. "Let this be a reminder," he said slowly, "that sometimes courage comes in the smallest forms. And sometimes even a trained professional can learn from a child." The statement was met with nods, murmurs, and quiet applause. The room had witnessed a transformation. What began as a demonstration of law enforcement prowess had become a testament to the unexpected power of presence, empathy, and the quiet authority of a child. As Lily stepped back fully into her mother's embrace, the crowd erupted in subdued applause. It was a mixture of relief, awe, and appreciation. The officer, now smiling openly, patted Max on the head, and even the judge allowed himself a rare moment of warmth in his usually reserved demeanor. Spectators began whispering to each other about how something so small could have such a profound effect. A 3-year-old girl had commanded respect, diffused tension, and inspired everyone present awe with just 2 words: "It's okay." The moment lingered long after it had ended. People in the courtroom would recall the experience for weeks, months, even years. Photographs, notes, and memories captured the interaction, but none could fully convey the emotional weight of those 2 words. They were simple, soft, and yet transformative, leaving a lasting impression, not only on Max and Officer Daniels, but on every single adult present. Courage, presence, and empathy had spoken louder than any command or training ever could. The moment hung in the courtroom like a delicate balance between disbelief and admiration. Max, the trained K9, had shifted from alert intensity to calm attentiveness almost instantly, responding to a presence so unexpected, yet so compelling. A tiny child whose voice carried courage, empathy, and authority all at once. Spectators who had anticipated either tears or chaos were frozen in astonishment. Eyes widened, hands covered mouths, and the subtle sounds of collective inhalations filled the room. Lily, standing just a few feet from the massive dog, radiated calm and confidence that seemed to stretch far beyond her 3 years. Officer Daniels, who had spent years training Max and countless hours observing his reactions in tense situations, stepped back slightly. A half-smile formed on his face, disbelief evident in his eyes. I've never seen this before," he murmured under his breath, his voice just audible over the low hum of the courtroom. Max, who had been trained to respond to aggression, fear, or hesitation, had accepted Lily's presence without a hint of dominance or challenge. The officer's colleagues exchanged glances, quietly shaking their heads. The dynamics in the room had shifted entirely. The courtroom murmured, a soft ripple of whispers traveling through the benches. Some adults shook their heads in disbelief, others smiled in quiet amazement. Cameras clicked softly, capturing the unprecedented moment. The journalists scribbled hurried notes, already anticipating headlines that would make the story spread far beyond the small town. Lily's bravery had turned the routine canine demonstration into a moment that could be described as extraordinary, if not historic, in its subtlety and power. And yet, it was not a display of aggression or spectacle. It was a quiet, remarkable act of presence and empathy. Max sat, his body relaxed but alert, tail flicking gently against the polished floor. His ears rotated slightly, focusing on the subtle cues Lily emitted, her breathing, posture, and calm tone. Officer Daniels allowed his gaze to drift across the dog's posture, noting the subtle yet profound change. Max had transitioned from a state of disciplined alertness to one of gentle attentiveness. The courtroom was witnessing not just obedience, but a genuine response to human emotion, a reminder of the deep bond that can exist between humans and animals. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, a mixture of pride and relief flooding through her. She hugged Lily gently, her heart racing with amazement. "You were incredible, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing back her daughter's curls. Lily smiled faintly, still calm, and echoed softly, "It's okay," reinforcing the words that had already transformed the atmosphere. Spectators and officers alike exchanged incredulous glances. The courtroom had shifted from tense anticipation to quiet admiration. The adults had expected a challenge. Instead, they witnessed something much rarer, an untrained, instinctive command of presence from a tiny child. Judge Harmon allowed the silence to linger before speaking, his voice calm, but carrying subtle awe. "This is extraordinary," he said. "Rarely does one witness the power of presence so clearly demonstrated. Today, a child has shown us that courage and empathy are not measured by size, training, or experience." The judge's words echoed through the room, reinforcing the gravity of the moment. Spectators nodded quietly, some whispering softly to one another about the remarkable interaction. Even seasoned officers, accustomed to tense encounters, seemed humbled. Officer Daniels approached cautiously, allowing Max to remain seated. "Good boy, Max," he said, his voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of wonder. The dog wagged his tail slightly, acknowledging the praise but maintaining focus on Lily. The subtle movement was almost poetic, a demonstration of the unique connection that had formed between human and animal in the span of mere minutes. The crowd remained silent, watching as the two shared a quiet, mutual understanding that transcended age, size, and training. The spectators began to react more openly. Some clapped softly, while others whispered encouragements or shared quiet laughter in disbelief. A few reached for their phones, carefully capturing the extraordinary tableau. The energy in the room had transformed completely. Where there had once been tension, fear, and expectation of chaos, there was now admiration, awe, and a sense of inspiration. The event, initially mundane, a demonstration of canine obedience, had evolved into something unforgettable, a living lesson in empathy, patience, and calm courage. The reporters scribbled notes furiously, each sentence attempting to capture the nuances of the moment. 3-year-old faces police dog and calms it with just 2 words, one scrawled. Another jotted, "Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, and gentle." The story was already taking shape in their minds, destined to spread far beyond the walls of the small courtroom. Social media would later amplify the tale, but here and now it existed as a shared, intimate experience for all who had witnessed it firsthand. Claire knelt beside Lily, ensuring her daughter felt supported yet free to observe. "See, Max is listening to you," she whispered. Lily nodded, her tiny expression calm, thoughtful, and aware. She had not intended to impress anyone. She had simply responded naturally, with empathy and patience. Max's calm demeanor reinforced the effectiveness of her presence, demonstrating a lesson many adults had yet to learn. True authority comes not from fear, force, or intimidation, but from confidence, clarity, and calmness. The officer's colleagues began murmuring among themselves, recognizing the uniqueness of what had occurred. "She doesn't just walk up to him. She communicates," one said quietly. "Not with words, but with presence. Incredible." Another nodded, eyes wide. Even seasoned professionals, who had handled countless canine interactions and tense situations, could not fully grasp the impact of a 3-year-old commanding the attention of a massive, trained dog without aggression or fear. The experience had left them humbled, inspired, and deeply moved. Judge Harmon finally allowed the room to breathe, signaling a subtle shift in the proceedings. "Let this serve as a reminder," he said, "that courage, empathy, and understanding are powerful tools. Today, we have seen that even the smallest among us can teach the greatest lessons." His words hung in the air, resonating with everyone present. Spectators nodded in quiet agreement, absorbing the lesson in a way that textbooks and lectures could never convey. It was a moment of pure, unexpected inspiration. The moment stretched, allowing all present to reflect. Children in the room whispered to their parents. Adults exchanged glances of shared astonishment, and journalists scribbled the last of their notes, aware that history had quietly occurred before them. Max remained seated, attentive yet calm, tail wagging lightly, a living testament to the quiet authority of a child who had faced him without fear. Lily had not only commanded attention, she had transformed the atmosphere, turning a tense demonstration into a lesson in courage, patience, and empathy. As Claire hugged Lily once more, a mother whispered, "You've made everyone so proud." Lily, with her calm smile and soft voice, whispered again, "It's okay," almost as if reinforcing the lesson she had just delivered. The simplicity of the words belied their power. Adults in the room, from seasoned officers to curious spectators, had experienced something extraordinary, a reminder that true authority, respect, and influence often come in the smallest packages, and sometimes the quietest words carry the greatest weight. The courtroom, once a chamber of tense anticipation and whispered speculation, had shifted completely. What had been expected as a routine demonstration of a canine's training had transformed into a spectacle of courage, empathy, and quiet authority. Spectators, officers, and journalists alike absorbed the aftermath of Lily's moment. The realization that a 3-year-old had not only faced a massive, trained police dog, but had calmed him with nothing more than 2 words and her unshakable presence. The air, previously taut with suspense, now hummed with awe, admiration, and a touch of disbelief. Claire embraced Lily tightly, brushing back her daughter's curls as the little girl rested calmly against her mother's chest. "You were incredible, Lily," she whispered, voice trembling with pride. Lily responded with a small, calm smile, her tiny head leaning against her mother's shoulder. She had done nothing extraordinary in her own mind, simply what she instinctively knew to be right, but the impact on the room was extraordinary. Spectators, from curious locals to hardened law enforcement officers, could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. Officer Daniels knelt beside Max, quietly praising the dog while keeping a careful eye on Lily. "Good boy, Max," he murmured, a mixture of relief and astonishment in his voice. Max wagged his tail subtly, ears flicking at the sound of Lily's voice, as though acknowledging her calm authority. The officer shook his head, still absorbing the scene. He had trained Max for years, and yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the way a tiny child's calmness and empathy had transformed the behavior of a fully trained police dog. The spectators, initially hesitant to react, began to murmur among themselves. "Did you see that?" whispered one woman, gripping her husband's arm. "She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, and the dog obeyed her presence." Others nodded, exchanging glances of amazement. Cameras clicked discreetly as journalists captured the extraordinary moment, scribbling notes with urgency, knowing that this story would resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Every person present was conscious of witnessing something rare, almost cinematic in its impact. Judge Harmon allowed a moment of quiet reflection before speaking again, his voice steady yet imbued with awe. "This courtroom has just witnessed something remarkable," he said, glancing over the spectators. "Courage comes in many forms. Today, it came in the smallest package imaginable, a 3-year-old girl who showed us that empathy. Calmness and presence can hold more power than size, strength, or training." The judge's words rippled through the room, reinforcing the gravity of what had occurred and framing the event not as a simple demonstration, but as a lesson in human and animal behavior. Children in the audience, inspired by Lily's bravery, whispered excitedly to their parents, Adults, some still holding their hands over their mouths in disbelief, nodded or whispered softly to one another. Even seasoned police officers, accustomed to tense confrontations and high-stakes demonstrations, leaned back in their seats, astonished by the subtle yet profound lessons unfolding before them. The event had shifted from a mere procedural demonstration into a shared experience of empathy, courage, and understanding. Journalists scribbled notes, capturing every detail of the interaction. 3-year-old calms police dog with 2 words, one wrote hurriedly, already anticipating the viral potential of the story. Another added, bravery isn't always loud or forceful. Sometimes it is quiet, deliberate, and gentle. The language struggled to capture the nuance of what had occurred. A child had demonstrated a rare mastery of presence, a profound ability to connect across species, and the subtle power of calmness in a world often dominated by noise and force. Officer Daniels spoke quietly to his colleagues, voice tinged with awe. "I've handled hundreds of demonstrations," he said, "and never have I seen a child interact with Max in this way. She didn't command him. She communicated with him." The officers nodded in agreement, exchanging glances filled with newfound respect for the young girl and her innate ability to convey presence and empathy. For all their training, they had never witnessed such a natural, unforced authority, and the moment left a lasting impression on even the most seasoned law enforcement professionals. Lily, standing once more beside her mother, absorbed the reactions of the room with quiet curiosity. She had not sought attention, fame, or recognition. She had simply been herself, calm, confident, and observant. Her 2 words, "It's okay," had transformed not only Max's behavior, but also the atmosphere of the courtroom. Adults, hardened by years of experience and often jaded by routine, found themselves humbled by the child's presence and her ability to diffuse tension so completely. Claire knelt beside her daughter, holding her hand and offering gentle praise. "You made everyone so proud," she whispered. Lily responded with a small nod, her eyes shining with the quiet satisfaction of having done the right thing. The interaction had created a bond, not only between her and Max, but also between her and the adults who witnessed it. A subtle lesson about courage, patience, and empathy had been imparted without the need for instruction, argument, or force, simply through the demonstration of calm presence. Judge Harmon signaled the continuation of the day's proceedings, though the courtroom's energy had irrevocably shifted. Spectators settled into their seats, whispering softly about the unprecedented display they had just witnessed. Some families in the audience discussed the event with their children, using it as a teaching moment about bravery and empathy. Others reflected quietly on how often strength and courage are measured in ways that overlook subtle but profound demonstrations of authority. As the room slowly returned to order, Officer Daniels allowed Max to remain near the front, noting the dog's continued attentiveness to Lily, even as routine protocols resumed. The memory of the encounter lingered, each participant in the courtroom acutely aware of the significance of the moment. The officers, spectators, and journalists had all witnessed a demonstration of human and animal connection that transcended training. Expectation and convention, a rare convergence of courage, calmness, and understanding. For the spectators, the impact was immediate and lasting. Conversations erupted quietly, recounting the details of Lily's approach, her words, and Max's unexpected response. "I can't believe how calm she was," one adult whispered. "And the dog? He just listened to her." Children in the audience giggled softly, whispering to their parents about how brave Lily had been, inspired to believe in their own potential for courage. The ripple effect of her actions extended far beyond the immediate demonstration, touching everyone present in subtle yet profound ways. The journalists captured every detail, their pens moving rapidly, knowing that this story would capture hearts nationwide. Social media posts, once written, would highlight not only Lily's bravery, but also the emotional power of calmness and empathy in the face of perceived danger. Even seasoned reporters, accustomed to dramatic events, struggled to find language capable of fully conveying the quiet awe that had permeated the courtroom. Yet they knew instinctively that the moment was special, a story worth telling in its entirety. As Claire guided Lily back to her seat, the mother whispered reassurance and praise, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. "You were amazing, sweetheart," she said. Lily, still calm and composed, smiled faintly, her small hand slipping into her mother's. The courtroom, though now returning to normal procedure, continued to hum with the lingering impact of the encounter. Adults discussed what they had witnessed, officers reflected on their own training and perceptions, and journalists prepared to share a story that would resonate far beyond the courthouse walls. In the quiet aftermath, Judge Harmon allowed a final reflection. "Let this day serve as a reminder," he said, voice steady, "that courage, empathy, and understanding are sometimes found in the smallest among us. Today, a child has shown us all that true bravery does not require size or strength. Only presence, calmness, and the willingness to act rightly." The room, already filled with admiration, absorbed the words fully. Everyone understood that what had just transpired was rare, meaningful, and unforgettable. The courtroom slowly began to return to its usual rhythm, yet the energy remained different. Spectators spoke quietly among themselves, still processing what they had witnessed. It was no longer a matter of a routine demonstration or standard protocol. It was something far more profound. The story of a 3-year-old calming a trained police dog had left its mark on everyone present. Adults whispered reflections, some amazed, some contemplative, while children's eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and inspiration. In that room, courage had taken a new, unexpected form, and it resonated deeply. Claire held Lily's hand tightly as they walked toward the exit, the mother's mind racing to reconcile pride, relief, and awe. "You are incredible, Lily," she murmured, her voice trembling. Lily smiled faintly, her calm demeanor unchanged, as though her actions were merely natural. It wasn't that she sought recognition or applause. She simply understood, in her own quiet way, how presence and empathy could influence the world around her. Claire knew she had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would stay with the community for a long time. Officer Daniels lingered by Max, observing the dog's behavior even as the courtroom emptied. Max had returned to his usual disciplined state, but a subtle attentiveness lingered in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of the small human who had commanded respect without authority or aggression. The officer's colleagues whispered among themselves, reflecting on the rare event. "She didn't just face him. She connected with him," one remarked, "and not in the way anyone else could." The experience had left the officers with a newfound appreciation for the unexpected power of calm, confident presence. Judge Harmon watched from his bench as the last spectators filed out, a thoughtful expression on his face. Rarely had he witnessed such a blend of human bravery and instinctive understanding. He leaned back slightly, considering the lessons of the day. Courage, he realized, did not always arrive with grand gestures or loud proclamations. Sometimes it came quietly, gently, yet its impact was undeniable. The child's calm authority had not only influenced Max, but also shifted the mindset of everyone in the courtroom. Outside the courtroom, conversations continued, carrying the story far beyond the polished wood and marble floors. Families who had attended spoke animatedly with friends and neighbors, recounting every detail, the calm voice, the 2 words, the unexpected bond between Lily and Max. Children tried to emulate the bravery they had witnessed, their imagination ignited by the demonstration of empathy and presence. Adults reflected on the quiet strength of the small, unassuming, yet profoundly courageous child. The ripple effects extended well beyond the courthouse walls, embedding themselves in hearts and minds. Local journalists interviewed Claire and Officer Daniels, capturing their perspectives. "It's amazing how a small child can remind us of what courage really is," one reporter said. Claire smiled softly, reflecting on her daughter's calm presence. "Lily didn't do anything extraordinary," she explained. "She just stayed calm and trusted herself. But somehow, everyone else saw it as extraordinary. I'm proud of her, but also grateful for everyone in that room, for Max, and for the lesson we all learned." Officer Daniels nodded in agreement. It was a reminder that calm presence and empathy are just as powerful as training and discipline. Max responded to her in ways he never does with anyone else. The story quickly began to spread in the local community, capturing hearts and inspiring conversations about courage, empathy, and the unexpected power of small acts. Parents discussed it at playgrounds, teachers shared it in classrooms, and local social media pages buzzed with admiration. The narrative wasn't just about a child facing a dog. It was about the profound effect one individual can have when approaching life with calm confidence and empathy. Even those who had not witnessed the event firsthand felt its impact through the storytelling of witnesses. In the weeks following the courtroom demonstration, the community began to recognize the broader lessons embedded in Lily's actions. Schools held discussions about courage, patience, and emotional intelligence, using the story as an example. Local K-9 units shared the video of the interaction with officers and trainers across the state, highlighting the unique and rare connection between Lily and Max. The child's two simple words, "It's okay," became a symbol of the power of presence, patience, and empathy, resonating far beyond the initial moment in the courtroom. Claire reflected privately on her daughter's quiet strength. "She's always been observant," she told a friend. "But I never imagined she could command respect and calmness from a fully trained police dog at just 3 years old. That wasn't taught, she just understood it." And the courtroom, everyone in it, saw it. The small gesture had rippled outward, teaching lessons to both children and adults about bravery in its purest, most understated form. Officer Daniels also noted the lasting effects. "We often focus on physical training, protocols, and discipline," he said. "But this showed me something different, a reminder that presence, empathy, and calmness can achieve what training alone cannot." Max was attentive in a completely new way. And so was everyone else in that courtroom. Even seasoned officers reflected on how rare it was to witness a display of authority and courage so quiet, so subtle, yet so transformative. The town quickly embraced Lily as a symbol of courage and empathy. Community events highlighted her story, local news segments celebrated the moment, and parents shared it with children as an example of how small actions can have a powerful impact. The narrative spread beyond the courthouse, inspiring conversations about patience, presence, and the lessons that can come from unexpected sources, especially from those society often underestimates. For Lily, the experience remained simple yet profound. She continued her days with calm curiosity, her actions no less thoughtful, her presence no less assured. The 2 words she had spoken in the courtroom carried more weight than she could understand, but their impact was undeniable. Adults, children, officers, and journalists alike remembered her quiet authority, her empathy, and the unexpected power of her presence. It was a lesson in courage that transcended age, size, and circumstance. Judge Harmon later remarked privately to colleagues, "We all thought we were witnessing a standard K-9 demonstration. Instead, we saw a moment of human understanding and courage that none of us will forget. Sometimes, the smallest person can make the largest difference." His reflection captured the sentiment of the entire courtroom. Courage is not always measured in grand gestures. Sometimes it's measured in quiet presence, empathy, and the ability to act calmly in the face of potential fear. Months later, the story continued to resonate. Parents in other towns shared it with their children. Law enforcement units discussed it in training seminars. Teachers in classrooms highlighted the value of empathy and calm presence. Lily's moment in the courtroom, though brief, had transformed the perceptions of courage for everyone who witnessed it firsthand or heard about it afterward. The narrative of a tiny child calming a fully trained police dog with 2 words remained a symbol of the extraordinary power of quiet bravery. And in the heart of that small courtroom, the lesson lingered. The polished floors, the wooden benches, and the attentive eyes of adults and children alike had all been touched by the remarkable presence of a tiny girl. Courage, empathy, and calm authority had triumphed, leaving an imprint that would inspire countless hearts. In a world often dominated by loudness, chaos, and force, Lily's simple words and calm presence reminded everyone that true power can reside in the smallest, quietest, and most unassuming forms. Months had passed since the remarkable courtroom moment, yet its echoes remained vivid in the minds of all who had witnessed it. The story of Lily, the 3-year-old who had faced Max, the fully trained police dog, with nothing more than her presence and 2 simple words, "It's okay," had spread far beyond the small courthouse. News outlets, local communities, and even national media shared the extraordinary tale. The narrative was simple, yet powerful. Courage does not require size, strength, or authority. It can reside in the quiet, empathetic, and observant hearts of the smallest among us. Claire often reflected on that day, the pride in her heart mingling with awe. She was just being herself, Claire said in interviews and casual conversations alike. But in doing so, she taught a lesson that all of us needed to learn. For Claire, the moment had been more than impressive. It had been transformative. She witnessed firsthand how courage, presence, and empathy could influence not only one trained dog, but an entire room of people, altering their perception of bravery forever. Officer Daniels continued to speak about the moment in training seminars and law enforcement briefings. "I've handled hundreds of high-stress demonstrations," he explained to his colleagues, "but nothing compares to the composure and authority the child displayed." Max responded to her instinctively, calmly, and respectfully. "I've realized that presence, empathy, and patience are as powerful as any protocol or physical command we rely on." The story became a touchstone for discussions about human-animal interaction, emotional intelligence, and leadership under pressure. The courthouse itself became a quiet shrine to the moment. Visitors and community members sometimes returned, recalling the precise spot where Lily had stood, the place where Max had sat obediently, and the intangible aura of calm authority that had permeated the room. Teachers, parents, and law enforcement officers alike used the story as a teaching moment. Children were encouraged to learn that courage can manifest in quiet ways, that empathy can influence even the strongest forces, and that confidence rooted in understanding can change the dynamics of any interaction. Journalists continued to follow the story, producing feature articles, interviews, and human interest pieces. They emphasized the transformative power of simple, empathetic actions. "In a world often dominated by aggression and noise," one reporter wrote, "a tiny girl reminded us that calm, deliberate presence can wield influence far greater than force." Her 2 words changed more than a dog's behavior. They shifted our perception of bravery. Social media posts spread the narrative worldwide, inspiring parents, educators, and professionals to consider courage in new ways. Within the law enforcement community, the story had an unexpected effect. Trainers revisited protocols for human-animal interactions, reflecting on how subtle cues, calm presence, and empathy could improve outcomes. Officer Daniels often recounted Lily's approach to Max, emphasizing that confidence and composure could sometimes achieve results that discipline alone could not. Even the most seasoned officers admitted to feeling humbled by the quiet authority of a child, recognizing that training and experience, while valuable, were not always superior to intuition, empathy, and understanding. Claire and Lily continued their daily lives, though the notoriety of the moment followed them in subtle ways. Claire found that parents at parks and schools would often approach her, praising Lily's bravery and expressing wonder at how a 3-year-old could have such impact. Lily, for her part, remained largely unaffected by the attention. She continued to explore the world with calm curiosity, demonstrating in everyday moments the quiet confidence that had astonished a courtroom. Though she did not yet fully understand the scope of her influence, the world around her had undeniably changed because of it. Judge Harmon occasionally reflected on the day with colleagues and friends. "We believed we were presiding over a routine demonstration," he mused, "but what we witnessed was extraordinary. Courage, empathy, and calm authority do not come in one form." Lily's actions reminded us all that even the smallest among us can inspire profound change. His words resonated with everyone who had attended the demonstration, leaving a lasting imprint that went beyond legal precedent or procedural demonstration. It became a story of inspiration, teaching, and shared human experience. In classrooms across the town, teachers retold the story of Lily and Max, encouraging students to reflect on what bravery truly meant. "Courage isn't always loud," one teacher explained to a class of young children. "Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it comes in the form of empathy, understanding, and calm presence. And sometimes it can come from someone much smaller than we expect, someone who surprises us with the power of being steady, confident, and compassionate." Children listened wide-eyed, inspired by the idea that bravery was within reach, regardless of age or size. As the story continued to resonate, families in the community began teaching their children lessons inspired by Lily's example. They emphasized the value of calm authority, empathy toward others, and the subtle strength found in quiet confidence. The courtroom demonstration had become a blueprint for understanding human and animal connection, inspiring young minds to embrace patience, courage, and presence in all aspects of life. Parents and educators alike marveled at how one small child could ignite such widespread reflection and transformation. Months later, Officer Daniels recounted the event at a national law enforcement conference. "I have trained K-9 South for over a decade," he explained, "but I have never witnessed anything like what Lily accomplished. In 2 words, she transformed a fully trained dog's behavior, and in the process, she reminded every adult in that room about the power of empathy, presence, and quiet courage. It is a story I will carry with me for the rest of my career." His colleagues listened intently, acknowledging the rare and profound lesson in human behavior. Claire reflected privately on the long-term impact of that day. "It's amazing how a small action can ripple outward," she said softly. Lily didn't know she was teaching lessons to adults, officers, and journalists, but she did. And in doing so, she changed perspectives about courage, authority, and empathy. Even in private moments, the mother realized that her daughter's bravery had left an indelible mark on everyone who had been present. The lesson extended beyond the courtroom into the very fabric of the community, influencing thought, behavior, and understanding. Years later, the story continued to inspire. Families recounted it at gatherings, educators used it as a teaching tool, and law enforcement officers shared it with trainees. The simple yet profound lesson endured. Courage is not measured by size or loudness. Empathy and calm presence carry their own power. The tale of Lily and Max remained a touchstone for discussions about bravery, emotional intelligence, and the extraordinary impact of the quiet, observant, and compassionate. It became a timeless reminder that even the smallest voices can be the loudest teachers. And in the heart of the community, that small courtroom remained a sacred memory. The polished floors, the wooden benches, the hushed spectators, and the attentive dog all or part of a moment that transcended time. Lily, the 3-year-old who spoke 2 words and changed everything, had become a symbol of courage and empathy that would inspire countless others. The lessons learned from that day about calm authority, empathy, and quiet bravery continued to ripple outward, touching hearts, shaping lives, and reminding the world that true courage can come from the most unexpected places.